The China National Knowledge Infrastructure really does represent China's intellectual output in terms of its publications. CNKI produces numerous databases which cover a broad range of disciplines and contain compelling metadata. These databases cover all sorts of content types, including millions of articles, dissertations, statistics. You get the idea. It's a great offering. I will not bore you with the full list. And now, because of our continued partnership with CNKI, which has lasted almost 20 years, these databases are available in North America to a degree that they never have been before. As I touched on the last slide, the content types available from CNKI abound. I will again spare you the list, but I want to highlight that CNKI's collections span everything from popular magazines to government standards. The chronology, meanwhile, spans 1915 to the present day and is updated daily. These updates include online first publications, which are available through CNKI before they even appear in print. The growth rate of these databases is also impressive, with journals growing at around 350,000 new articles per month. Core to our work at Eastview is that we make these Chinese resources easier to access and understand for researchers who don't understand Chinese. We've worked hard to improve the English language accessibility of Chinese journal articles, dissertations, reference works, and more, and there's more to be done. For right now, in comprehensive journal databases, China Academic Journals, and Academic Focus, there are more than 18 million journal articles with English titles and abstracts or full text. Content types like dissertations have significant English coverage, with 99% containing English abstracting and indexing. One reason for the prevalence of English in dissertations and theses is that graduate schools in China require that students provide an English abstract for their dissertation or thesis to be accepted. While the majority of CNKI's databases have English interface options, several databases are entirely in English. In addition to English and abstracting, full text articles from these databases, well, those are also in English. A final note on Eastview's mission, I want to emphasize the importance of providing information from China to a North American market. Eastview prides itself on providing the most up-to-date information from China through its partnership with CNKI. We have also worked with CNKI to introduce things like PDF downloads and expand English interfacing. As of today, we offer more CNKI products to North America than have ever been available, and these resources are more relevant than ever. It is important to understand China's research output and to know what is being researched in China. I'd like to start with the question of how a climate change researcher could leverage CNKI resources to bolster their work. I'll start with the most recognized and acknowledged CNKI database, China Academic Journals, or CAJ. CAJ is the largest continuously updated Chinese journal database in the world, with more than 10,000 academic journals published in mainland China. CAJ covers science, engineering, technology, agriculture, philosophy, medicine, humanities, social sciences, etc. The database includes content back to 1915 and today has around 60 million journal articles. The database has a main search page, which is shown here on top, an advanced search page, and a journal navigation function. But it also has a few more tricks up its sleeve, which I will outline in the coming slides. For a researcher who cannot read Chinese, CAJ is still largely accessible. Even though the majority of articles have full text in Chinese, CAJ has an English interface, English abstracts, and indexing, diagrams, and visual analysis graphics, all that researcher can draw on. On this slide, I've highlighted the English abstracting of the first article that comes up when you search CO2 emissions. You can see that the English is of good quality, the publication is very recent, and that this is at the forefront of climate research. English indexing in Cnki is always provided by the publisher. It's never translated by machine. So the English is as the publisher originally intended. I find this English indexing to be an exciting frontier in Chinese resources because these articles at the forefront of STEM are clearly introduced and accessible to English users. The next tools from CAJ for English language users are enhanced publishing and cross-language search. I group these two together because they are both advanced searching tools available in CAJ. With cross-language search, users' queries are automatically translated into Chinese and are searched in both the English entered by the user as well as the Chinese translation. Enhanced publishing means that an article's images, graphs, and diagrams are available for direct download without downloading the full text. As product manager for Cnki, I have regularly accessed these enhanced publishing images. And in my experience with enhanced publishing, the majority of diagrams and graphics, especially for STEM papers, are in English. And I've included examples below. I'd also like to highlight the visual analysis tools. From the search results page, users can generate graphics based on search results. These graphics can give users, even those who don't read Chinese, an overview of available resources. The graphics on this slide represent the publication trend of a search for CO2 emissions and the distribution of search results across disciplines. In talking about English accessibility, it's important to note that Chinese is a language especially well suited for machine translation, which has developed quickly and rigorously. I'd like to highlight an example of how a user who cannot read Chinese could use machine translation to understand a full text article in Chinese. This first example is the discussion section of the article you saw indexed before. So that is the very first search result for CO2 emissions. You can see that the meaning is well conveyed through machine translation. And I want to add, I didn't pick and choose this example. The quality of machine translation is consistent across Chinese full text articles. Next, I want to highlight how a climate change researcher who doesn't read Chinese could still use other Cnki resources besides CAJ. Academic reference is a good place to start. Academic reference gives users an English platform to browse reference works as well as conduct expanded searches for articles with English abstracts or even encyclopedia items in English. So academic reference is a good guide for what English content is available across formats and fields. The search result on the slide shows that there are over 10,000 results for CO2 emissions. That includes English full text, English abstracts, and English items, which are encyclopedia entries. Academic focus, which is also fully in English, gives users an English platform to browse full text journal articles from China, the full text also being in English. Have I said English enough? A researcher could stay in an entirely English environment while still accessing research output from China. Now I'd like to move on to databases that provide some interface in English, but will, at the end of the day, be more easily accessed by someone who reads Chinese. China Yearbooks is an excellent example, and one that would be useful to a climate change researcher. In particular, China Yearbooks highlights yearbook full text, not just statistics, allowing researchers to dive into the analytical or introductory parts of a yearbook, as well as statistics. Here's an example of a CO2 emissions chart I found in China Yearbooks while preparing my presentation. While doing this search, I could see which yearbooks were the most relevant to my search, and then I could go into these yearbooks and do a deeper dive into what data they are actually collecting. Another source that has English interfaces is theses and dissertations. These can be searched in English or Chinese and have significant English indexing because that English abstract is required for a paper submitted for graduation. The English coverage in this database is excellent, and the information is also compelling. I have found it particularly useful for highly localized information. For example, a graduate student in Zhengzhou, Henan province, made the map that you see on this slide. The map captures impermeability on the ground, and that indicates flood risk. Information at that level of detail across Chinese localities can be found in theses and dissertations and is highly relevant to climate change researchers, especially as flood risk increases. I've continued the theme of flood management in this next slide because I think it captures the strength of this database as well. Academic Image provides searchable images from articles and links back to the original text. So in these images, I've searched for flood and found numerous related maps and charts. This database accepts searches in English, but is best used in Chinese, which is why you see Chinese on the screen here. There are a few other CNKI databases that are best used with Chinese, but that are also relevant to climate change researchers. I've categorized these as industry databases. They include transportation, maritime industry, and IT and communication. I want to emphasize that though these databases are in Chinese, ECU has produced English language user guides for all of them, which increases their English language accessibility. Finally, I want to touch on some government and government adjacent databases that would be relevant to climate change researchers. On this slide, I've highlighted the first search result for CO2 emissions in the database China Government Gazettes. The document is relevant to researchers as it highlights efforts the Chinese government has undertaken to tackle climate change. Government Gazettes is a useful database for any kind of policy or initiative searches. A second government database is Chinese standards. A quick note, you'll see that yearbooks, CAJ, a couple of the databases that we're going to cover today have this blue bar, and across the top it says academic journals, theses and dissertations, conferences, newspapers. That means that there's this one interface, and it's in English, that's designed to link all of these databases. So it has a unified search across those, and you can highlight each of them to find results of each content type. So in this case, what you're looking at is a bar that has all of those other content types, but we've highlighted standards. So the search results here are specifically for standards. Chinese standards is a good source for regulation and industry information. The example here highlights standards for indoor air quality. The last government database I want to highlight is China Science and Technology Achievements. These achievements, they highlight major science and tech initiatives across the country. In this case, which you can see, I used machine translation to kind of highlight its English accessibility. The researchers were focused on reducing emissions in blast furnaces. And if you take a look at the translation, not only the meaning, but also the statistics are well preserved. I hope that by outlining these databases using climate change as an example has drawn your attention to their research value. We covered a couple of concepts in this first section. First, by looking up CO2 emissions, it was clear that Chinese resources have importance to climate change research. Second, most of the databases I shared are accessible to researchers who don't read Chinese. And finally, for those researchers who don't read Chinese, I also highlighted the utility and quality of machine translation. We also covered a lot of databases, so I'd like to review. The first was CAJ and its English language tools, which included visual analysis tools, enhanced publishing, as well as the English indexing. Next, we covered academic reference and academic focus, both of which are entirely in English. Then we went over China yearbooks as a tool for finding statistics and navigating yearbook full text. We then looked at theses and dissertations, and I emphasized that they are good sources for pretty localized studies. For example, a Zhengzhou University student studying Zhengzhou's impermeability. And after theses and dissertations, we dove into those industry databases. Dove into is the wrong word. I didn't touch as much on those ones because they are really specialized. I do see applications for transportation in climate change, same with maritime industry, and same with IT and communications. These industry databases cover a broad range of business relevant findings, or even, ice cap melting and sea ice extent relevant findings. And then the last kind of broader coverage that we talked about was government databases. We covered China government gazettes, Chinese standards, and China SciTech achievements. And those round out an understanding of China's climate change effort. So I didn't want to go into too much detail, and I didn't want to be completely exhaustive on this one topic. The final topic we're going to cover as a use case is medicine. I wanted to highlight some different realms of science and social science, but medicine captures a couple of strengths of CNKI's databases that I really would like to highlight. So I've highlighted an example here of a Chinese full text article translated into English. I wanted to again emphasize the strength of these translations. And I wanted to say that is, I think, especially true in STEM because of the structure of these STEM papers. So I've translated a fair number of medical papers using machine translation, and their quality is usually pretty good. That being said, users might want to supplement machine translation with high-level dictionaries. And that's where the database China Hospital's Knowledge Base is very useful. China Hospital's Knowledge Base has English translation tools that are based on mesh subject headings. So you can see here an example search for capsid, and there's several specialized vocabulary. And then when you click into each of those, you can see the English definition based on mesh definitions, and I've quality checked that and made sure that it's consistent. And then you can see the Chinese definition of the word as well as the Chinese encyclopedia entry. So that's a really compelling tool for somebody to, just to go back here, to use these specialized dictionaries to look up some key terms from a machine translation just to make sure that they get a correct understanding of what could be a very specialized area of research. So I also wanted to highlight, this is still within China Hospital's knowledge base, and I wanted to highlight that the interface is in Chinese. We do have user guides for it in English, but the search is still cross-language. You can see that it's already switched the search prion into the Chinese word for prion, and the results are using the Chinese and the English. So it's by default a cross-language search. Another good source besides China Hospital's knowledge base for medical information is patents. Patents really capture what is at the forefront of private industry in terms of developing these kind of key technologies, medical technologies. So here I've done an example search again for prion, and I've shown that the results for patents have Chinese titles, but you can translate those Chinese titles into English and get compelling results. And the patent coverage is really extensive. There's more than 36 million patents in here. And so if you're looking for the forefront of a medical technology or a specific type of medicine, the patents database is an excellent place to get started. Within this same search function is our databases for Chinese and international conferences. So these are both under the category conferences, and you can divide by Chinese conferences or international conferences. I've conducted the same search for the same term, this term prion, and I've clicked into a conference to show that the conference actually does have its abstract paperwork in English. So conferences, while not all in English, do have a good amount of English accessibility, and the quality of the English is quite high. This really expands what's available to researchers because conferences often have findings before those things make it to a published paper. So while you have to be careful because nothing is peer reviewed and it hasn't made it to publication yet, it is a really good place to track the most advanced research in a field. Before I move on from this, I also want to say everything I've covered for medicine, with the exception of the hospital's knowledge base, that is conferences, patents, those could totally be relevant to other fields as well. And that goes for the popular interest magazines, that goes for everything that we've kind of covered, the monographic serials, everything we've covered in these categories can be used across categories. I'm just using these as key examples of how they can be employed. Now I'm going to get a little bit more specialized into what is really on the nose with medicine. This database is called Applied Medicine, and this one's all in Chinese, but it has a really unique function, so I still wanted to show it. And you can actually search in English, though it has better results if you search in Chinese. So for this one, I've conducted a search for headache, and you can see that it is a symptom search that gives you cases, possible diagnoses, possible treatments, and also possible related symptoms, so that you can then click into each of those possible related causes or symptoms, and you can go to papers that specifically highlight cases with those symptoms or specific treatments. So that's, I think, a really interesting tool that if you were looking for a specific treatment of something, you could go in here and kind of find that very specific subcategory. I think that's an excellent tool for medicine. And then the last one is that no discussion of Chinese databases would not be, and medicine would be complete without covering Chinese traditional medicine. And the traditional Chinese medicine databases from Cnki are excellent instructional databases. So the first one is Traditional Chinese Medicine Video, and that provides videos on acupuncture and massage and some different treatment methods unique to traditional medicine. And then the other one, the knowledge service platform, that one is pretty specifically research papers, introductory papers. So the video format provides something a little bit unique. So within this realm of CNKI's medical databases, we've covered a lot more specialization. These medical databases have some of the more, less generalizable search functions, but the specialization is really high quality, especially with those mesh subject headings, which allow actually, quality interconnectedness between topics. That brings me to my next point, which is the superior language tools and cross-language searching, which is bolstered by the mesh subject headings. And then finally, timely research at the forefront of medical science. And that's partially possible through patents, which are published quickly and represent what's happening in the private sector, as well as academia. So again, I want to review the databases we went over. We started with China Hospital's knowledge base, which encompasses medical literature, as well as provides translation and reference tools. China patents, which reflect the most rapidly developing science in the private sector. China conference proceedings and international conference proceedings, which also talk about the newest findings because they've yet to reach publication. Applied medicine, which maps symptoms and cases to research. And then the traditional Chinese medicine coverage, both in video form and in non-video form. I also wanted to note, as I'm wrapping up these use case examples, that we are constantly working to improve accessibility of these databases. And we're constantly working to improve our user guides and our videos. So we have recently produced a CAJ tutorial. This will hopefully be the first of many video tutorials of our resources. And that CAJ tutorial is available online. If you would like some very specific instructions on how to use, for example, visual analysis or, any of these filtering options or what is online first, so that's a good resource. And it's also a good resource to share with students who are just getting into the world of Cnki resources. The CAJ tutorial, as you saw, that blue bar I pointed out that has numerous content types across the top of it, that format is relevant to a lot of these databases, and the CAJ tutorial really highlights how to use that interface. So if students view the CAJ tutorial, they will also know how to use CMSD, CYFD, all of these other databases that are hosted in that same interface. So I want to thank you all for joining. My mission was to show you a broad range of databases. I hope it wasn't too much of a whirlwind, and show you how these could be applied to use cases. I think that there's really compelling research published in Cnki, hosted there, and I want people to be able to have the skills to access it. And by mapping kind of these moments of accessibility, I'm hoping to expand the audience, because not everybody has time to learn medicine and learn Chinese, or learn climate change research and learn Chinese. And so it is really important that we continue to emphasize the accessibility of these resources across disciplines. How, there are Cnki resources that someone with no Chinese skills can access from start to finish, and there's a lot of them. There are some that are going to be easier access by researchers who know Chinese, but our priority is making sure that there's both people who can't read Chinese getting to access a fair amount, and then we also are giving timely access to those researchers who do know Chinese. If you look at the research available as it's all translated into English in North America, it's a lot slower. And so we need to be able to get these resources in people's hands quickly. So that is often in Chinese. That being said, there's constant advancement to make this more accessible. So thank you all for joining. I hope this has been informative. I'm always available to answer questions. I'm excited about setting up trainings. So if your institution is interested in using more and more of this universe of Cnki resources, I'm happy to train people on them, and I can go more in depth than we went today. Today was kind of an overview.